Today we're talking about memory card slots. Some cameras have one of them and some have two. Why two and what's the best way to use them? I'm going to talk about it on today's episode of
Ask David Bergman.
Hey everyone, welcome back. Here I am, as always, answering your photography questions on Adorama TV. If you've got a question, just go to askdavidbergman.com and submit that form on the site. If it's one that I think is going to help a lot of other photographers, I just might pick your question to answer on a future show. Today I've got one sent in by Don M, and he wants to know, what is the best way to use dual memory slots? Thanks, Don, for sending that in. Let's talk about memory slots. So every camera has a little slot where you put the memory card that stores your image files when you're shooting. They're like little hard drives that the camera writes your files to. And then you can remove that little hard drive and copy those images to your computer for editing. Now, SD cards or secure digital might be the most common type of card right now because you'll see them on many entry-level cameras and even on some high-end models. They're relatively small and are made of a very thin plastic, making them a bit on the fragile side. Now, there are other types of cards, and some formats are still in use, while others have come and gone, like the Dodo Bird. Now, there's CF, or Compact Flash, micro drives, which are long gone, CFast, XQD, CF Express, micro SD, and on and on and on. Now, some of those are physically bigger than SD cards and are thicker and more durable, which of course is always a good thing. Each camera is made to take a certain type of card, so you just have to make sure you buy the correct type for your particular camera. Now, over the last decade or so, we've seen more cameras come out with two card slots in them. Sometimes both slots are made to take the same type of card, while some take two different types. The Canon EOS R3, for example, and the R5 as well, they take a CF Express in one slot and an SD card in the other one. So why two slots, you might ask? Well, there are actually some benefits to having two different places to write images, and there are a few different ways you might decide to use those slots. Now, since Don asked about it, what I'm going to do is go over each option and explain why you would choose each one. Now, I'm a Canon shooter, so I'm going to use the terminology that's in the Canon R3 body, but many other cameras have similar options. You just have to dig down in your menus and find where those are. Now, in the R3, those settings are in the yellow wrench menu, and it's called Record Function plus Card / Folder Select. Now, there are a bunch of options in there, and Canon distinguishes settings for stills and video by using the little still camera icon or the little video camera icon. That's how you can tell the difference. Now, the first setting is asking you if you want to automatically separate stills and video. This selection is kind of like a preset, and when you enable it, the R3 automatically saves any video that you shoot to slot 1, which is the faster CF Express card, and then any stills that you shoot are going to go to the slower SD card. Now, why would you choose to separate the two? Well, if you're a hybrid shooter, that does both stills and video on the same shoot. If you have everything go to the same card, then you have to take the time to separate them in your computer after the fact for editing. It's just a convenience thing that you can actually have those files already separated in the camera, and then you know all the videos are going to be on one card and all of the stills are going to be on the other. Now, keep in mind that when you're enabling that function, it's always going to set video to slot 1 and stills to slot 2. Even if there's only one card in the camera, if you have one slot open and one card in the camera, that means that you can't shoot video if you only have an SD card inserted in slot 2, for example, since slot 1 is empty. And it goes the other way, of course, as well. You can't shoot stills if you only have a CF Express card in slot 1 and nothing in slot 2. So keep that in mind if you're going to use that automatic setting. However, if you want more control over exactly where your files are going to go, then you need to disable that automatic function and go a bit deeper into the settings. The first thing you should look at are the two record / play selections. That lets you decide which card you're referencing in the settings for recording and playback of stills and video. For example, if you wanted to switch it and shoot video to the slower SD slot instead of the CF Express card for some strange reason, then you'd set stills for slot 1 and video for slot 2. If you only have one card in the camera, then you can only set both of those to the slot that contains a card, of course. So when you go into the record options for still photos, you can choose between these four settings: standard, auto switch card, record separately, or record to multiple. Standard is the default. That means the camera is going to save all of your files to one card. If you fill up the card completely, then you can't shoot anymore, even if there's another card in the other slot. Now, what auto switch does, it's the same as standard mostly, except when the first card gets full, it switches to the second card. And this was really the first reason why cameras with 2 slots were introduced back in the day. Card capacity used to be pretty small, and for those of us that shot a lot of high-speed bursts when covering sports, we filled up those cards really quickly. There's actually nothing worse than being in the middle of a big play and the big game and running out of space on your card halfway through a burst. So now you could have a second card ready to go at all times and don't have to worry about that happening to you. Now, the next setting, the third setting here, is record separately. Now, really, that's only relevant if you shoot RAW plus JPEG files. Some people have a workflow where they want to shoot the RAW file format on their images, but also need an immediate JPEG created from that RAW inside of the camera. Record separately, what that's going to do, it's going to split those files and put them on separate cards. And once you activate that, you also have to go into the quick menu to designate which file type you want to go to each card. You can make that decision. You could also do lower res JPEGs and higher res JPEGs if you want to do them that way and not shoot RAW, but I don't recommend that. I'm a RAW shooter all the way. Now, why would you do this? Why would you separate those in the first place? Well, if you're a live event photographer, for example, and you have editors on site who are grabbing cards from you and sending out files right away, they might only want quick JPEGs for their workflow. Record separately is great for that because you can shoot RAW files for yourself or for long-term archiving and then only have JPEGs on the card that gets taken from you at that time. Now, the last option in here, for stills at least, is record to multiple. This records all of your files, RAW, JPEG, video, whatever you're shooting, to both cards at the same exact time. Essentially, it's a real-time backup. If you're the kind of photographer who shoots once-in-a-lifetime pictures, like wedding photographers, for example, then this setting is ideal for you. You absolutely cannot go to the bride at the end of the night and say, oops, sorry, my bad. My card got corrupted and I don't have any of your pictures from your big day. That would be a very bad thing. You don't want to do that. Now, there is one other menu item for video settings. I personally don't shoot too much video, but it essentially has the same options as stills. Standard, auto switch, you can separate RAW and MP4 files, and you can record to multiple for that immediate in-camera backup. So now that you know what all the options are, you might be asking, what do I do personally? Well, I might regret admitting this publicly, but let's just keep this between us. I actually use standard, and I only keep one card in my camera. Now, before you freak out, let me explain why I do this. First of all, I love the durability of the CF Express cards, and I'm not a fan of the little flimsy, plasticky SD cards. Only one of the slots on my R3s and R5s take CF Express, so that's the format I've chosen to use. Now, auto switch seems like a great option so you don't run out of card space. However, cards today are massive, right? They hold so many images, especially if you're only shooting stills. Now, I'm using the Prograde Digital 1 terabyte CF Express cards, so no worries about running out of space anytime soon. If I use smaller cards or if I shot a lot of high-res video and I filled up my cards more often, there's still a few issues that always bugged me about using that auto switch option. First of all, after a shoot, you need to remember to pull both cards from your camera and copy everything off. If not, of course you won't have all of your work, and if you don't check carefully, you might forget about the files on that second card. Now, I don't always know when or if it switches over in the middle of a shoot, so I'm never really sure which card has my images on it, and I sometimes wind up wasting time trying to copy from a card that I never used. Plus, when you have a card in each slot, you have to set which one you're using for playback or for viewing on that back screen. And when I used to shoot with 2 cards, it just seemed that occasionally I couldn't see the images that I wanted. They were always on the other card. So it's just simpler for me to use one card for shooting everything, all on one card, shooting and playback. Now, as for record separately, if you're the only one editing your own images, then I don't see any reason to split files between 2 cards, as it just creates a bunch of extra work. Personally, I only shoot RAW, so it's a non-issue. On the very rare occasions that I work a live event with an editor on site, I will go ahead and use a second card for the JPEGs that I deliver to that client on site. Now, lastly, record to multiple, that instant backup. It does make sense in some cases. If I was a wedding photographer, I would definitely shoot that way so that I had an in-camera backup right away. But for my workflow, shooting to both cards adds a layer of complexity that I don't want or need. I'm only going to pull one of the cards when I do my edits, and then I have to remember to pull that other card later at some point and clean it off. Otherwise, eventually that card's going to fill up, it's going to run out of space, and then I won't be able to shoot even if there's plenty of room left on my primary card, and that's going to be a problem. Now, I know some photographers prefer to use multiple smaller cards because they don't trust putting all of their images on one big card like I do. And when I'm on tour, I back up all of my images to my computer and an external drive before I walk out of the venue for the night. I also use only high quality cards. Prograde Digital are my favorite, and I run their Refresh Pro software every so often to return the cards to their factory state. And I personally have had no issues with them failing on me. Now, of course, I'm not naive enough to think that it's never going to happen because eventually all cards on hard drives can and will fail. But by spending the money to get quality cards, you minimize that risk, and software recovery programs are very good in the rare instances of an issue. Now, your mileage may vary, especially if you're not using good cards. So don't blame me if you lose everything on a shoot. I'm just telling you what I do. Backup is never a bad thing. So there you have it. 2 card slots. Do you guys need it? Maybe, maybe not. It depends on your particular situation. Do you need to separate video from stills? Do you have to separate JPEGs from RAW? You need more card space or want an immediate backup? If you've got 2 card slots in your camera, let me know in the comments below if you're using them and what works best for you. I'm sure there's a bunch of scenarios that I haven't even thought of. And Don, I hope that answers your question. Remember, you can send in your own question by going to askdavidbergman.com and filling out that form. If you're not already a subscriber to the Adorama YouTube channel, go ahead and click that subscribe button down below. Hit the little bell icon. That way you'll be notified as soon as new shows come out all week long from myself and the other hosts right here on Adorama TV. Thanks so much for joining me, and I hope you come back next time when I've got another question to answer right here on Ask David Bergman.